Hello and welcome. Today I'll be doing a video about the early and mail-in voting that is currently in. But before we get started, please go subscribe. We're currently at 370 subscribers. Let's hit 400 subscribers by election day. We're only 5 days away, so go and subscribe and let's get started. So currently there's 71.5 million ballots returned, with 44% being registered Democrats, 37% being registered Republicans, and 61% being mail-in, 39% being in-person. Among gender, 53% women, 44% men. Age, 11% 18 and 29, 12% 30 to 39, 13% 40 to 49, 28% 50 to 40, 64, and 36% being 65 and older. But in result, it currently is 44% registered Dems, 37% Republicans, 19% independent. So there's good numbers for both Trump and Biden. We're going to go over first the state of Arizona, which has now showed a tie in average polling, which is a good sign for the Trump campaign. And in early voting, registered Democrats only now hold a 3-point lead. Before it was about a 7-point lead, and it's narrowed about 4 points in the last couple of days. That is a good sign for Trump. He's done a couple of rallies there. Biden's campaign has done a couple of events as well. But I think it is swaying now back into Trump's direction, with polling now being tied, as well as good signs in the early vote for Trump. Going into the state of Colorado, this is another good sign for Biden, though, this time. 7% lead for registered Democrats there, and 37% independent. So it still shows it is somewhat of a swing state, but is now trending further to Joe Biden. So I'd give Joe Biden currently Colorado in the likely column. Let me just quickly fill out the safe states for Trump and Biden. Actually, I'll go over Virginia too. So there we go. That is all the safe and likely states. We're going to go back into the early mail-in voting. Going into the state of Florida, this is good news for Donald Trump's campaign. Now the lead has gone from a 8-point lead down to a 3-point lead for Biden, with 6.7 million votes cast, 21% being independent. A 3-point lead will not cut it, and 21% isn't all going to go for Biden. It's going to probably split in the early vote, probably 70% to Biden, 30% to Trump, and then it'll flip-flop on election day voting. It'll go probably 70% Trump, 30% Biden for independent voters, but that gives Trump enough room, with the 3 points only being behind, to win the state, as well as polling showing a very close race there, with about a tie average. Going into Georgia, this is more good news for Donald Trump's campaign. Trump has held on to his 7-point lead, with now over 3 million ballots returned. That is good news. Biden's campaign was pushing the state late in the race. I don't think it's going to be enough to close the gap. It'll go lean Trump probably by 3 to 4 points. In Iowa, let's see. Party registration, the gap has narrowed slightly, and about only 50% of the vote from the previous 2016 election is in. I think the state is going to go to Trump. It is not enough percentage going to Biden, where I'd see him winning the state. He would need a higher percentage, as well as a low turnout being on here. I don't see it. It's going to be probably going to Trump by 3 to 4. Not Maine. Michigan. Almost 2.4 million votes cast. Trump still leading by 2 points. This is a surprise in the early vote, but 20% is independent. If 30% went to Trump and the current early vote, that would be about 6 points Trump. So that would push him up to about 47 to 53. So there'd be a current 6-point lead for Biden there in early voting, but it'll close the gap on Election Day. I still see it favoring Biden, probably about between 2 to 4 points. In Nevada, this is good news for Trump's campaign. The state is narrowing with only 4% lead for Biden there with registered voters. 24% is independent. There has been pretty decently high turnout, about 70% of what was in the last election. I still see this going lean Biden, but the state is narrowing, looking good for Trump. He's done a couple of rallies and events there lately. Biden has not been there too much recently, which could cause some issues on Election Day, and it could surprisingly flip to Trump. I don't really see it, but it's looking good for him at the moment in time. We'll see when more mail-in early voting comes in. I'll go over more of this in the days to come. I'll try to do one probably every day because there's about 1 to 4 million votes added. In New Mexico, this is another good sign for Biden. %35 Trump, 50% Biden. He's holding a 50% mark. That is a good sign. I see the state going to him probably 8 to 14 points. That's a good sign for Biden and Democrats in the future, having New Mexico become less of a lean Democratic state to a safe Democratic state. In North Carolina, the gap has narrowed also. It was a 10-point lead for Biden. Now it's narrowed to an 8-point lead. That's a good sign for Trump. There is more registered Democrats in the state, but the early vote has been narrowing, which is a good sign for Trump's campaign. I see it as a coin flip, slightly favoring Trump. I'd give it to him in a tilt margin. Ohio, this is very good news for Republicans and Trump. 48% GOP registered voters, 39% Democratic registered voters. That is a 9-point lead for Trump. That is huge. That is more than Georgia. That is more than Arizona. And Arizona used to be a reliably Republican state. Now it is a toss-up. Ohio will probably go to Trump, probably 5 to 7 points. Going into Pennsylvania, this is a good sign for Democrats, but with lower turnout and Republicans not liking the early mail-in vote, they're going to be coming out heavily on Election Day. The state is slightly narrowed. It was about a 70% to a 20%, so it's a 4-point shift to Trump. With these numbers, it's going to be very weird to look at. I'm just going to leave it blank. There's going to be very heavy turnout of Republicans on Election Day, probably 70% Republican, 30% Democrat. We'll see where that lands us. Going next into the state of Texas, this is a very good sign for Trump. Very high turnout, 63% of the total vote of the last election. 54% registered Republicans, 36% registered Democrats. That is almost a 20-point lead. That is, 18 points, not including independents. If all the independents went to Biden, that would give him give Trump 8-point lead, which I don't think will happen. I think the state is going to narrow up into probably a 6 to 7 point victory there. But that is a good sign for Republicans. In the state of Virginia, this is another good sign for Biden. The state is still showing only an 11-point lead at this time. There's been a narrowing in the margins, but is looking like it's becoming even more of a safer Democratic state before being a very Republican state in the early 2000s and shifting into a toss-up and then shifting into a lean Democratic state heading towards a safe Democratic state. I'd give it to Biden likely, probably by 8 to 12 points. In Wisconsin, very good numbers for Trump, leading 7 points with registered voters, not including independents, but very low turnout. That is only about, not low turnout, but not too good at the same time. That's about 50% of the last election. If you compare that to the average, that's down by 8% compared to what the total vote currently cast is. So I would give Wisconsin also, I think Biden will win the state, not at all by the ABC 17-point margin, but I think Biden will probably pull off a win there, probably by between 1 and 5 points. I'm not going to give an exact closer range because Wisconsin polling is notoriously bad. It shifted 7 points in 2016, so I'm not saying Trump's out of the race, but I think it's favoring Biden at the moment. Going into New Hampshire, good sign for Biden here, but only bad sign is very low turnout. 52% registered Dems, 21% registered Republicans, 27% independents. I see the state going to Biden probably 4 to 5 points. In Maine, about 50 to 60% current turnout of the previous election. Very large lead for Biden there. It's probably going to go to Biden by roughly 6 to 10 points, but the second congressional district I see going to Trump probably by 3 to 4. In Minnesota, better numbers for Trump, but not good numbers for Trump. Trump's behind by 15 out of 1.3 million, which is about 50% of the last election vote. Maybe even a little underneath that. I see the state currently favoring Biden probably by 2 to 4 points. And going down to Nebraska's second, which you can't just individually look at. I see Biden winning there probably by 2 to 4 points also. It is looking good in polling and the odds. So I think the election will come down to Pennsylvania, which has a very divided idea of how to vote, which is early with Democrats heavily favoring it and Republicans heavily favoring the day of election vote. Thanks for watching. Please go like, comment, and subscribe. Let's hit 400 subscribers by Election Day. Thank you for watching.